Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of metal scraping against concrete and stepping outside to find your most prized possession gone from your driveway. That cold, sinking feeling in your chest, that's exactly what James Smith felt the night his rare 1969 Ducati Scrambler, worth over $500,000, vanished into the dark. At first, he thought it was theft, but the truth was worse. His bike hadn't been stolen, it had been towed. Not by police, not by city officials, but by a smug, power-drunk HOA president who thought she could treat a black man's property like garbage. What she didn't know was that James wasn't just another homeowner, and her little act of arrogance was about to start a fire she couldn't put out. James was a man who enjoyed peace and privacy. He wasn't the type to mingle at the block barbecues or gossip over hedges like the rest of the homeowners in that perfectly polished, overly managed community. He paid his dues, followed their rules, and expected just one thing in return: to be left alone. That expectation ended the morning he opened his mailbox. Inside sat a letter printed on that pompous HOA letterhead, the kind that smelled like arrogance. Mr. Smith, it has come to the board's attention that your motorcycle, currently visible in your driveway, does not meet our community's aesthetic standards. Please remove it from public view within 72 hours to avoid further action. He read it once, then twice. By the third time, his expression shifted from disbelief to quiet fury. They'd called his Ducati an unsightly vehicle. Unsightly. This wasn't just any bike, it was a masterpiece. The Golden Tank 69 Scrambler, polished to perfection, its chrome glinting under the sun like art in motion. And these people, these self-important, rule-clutching neighbors, had labeled it an eyesore. At first, James laughed. Surely this was some mistake. Maybe some overzealous HOA volunteer with too much time and too little sense had gotten carried away. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. This was deliberate. This was control masquerading as regulation. And James Smith, a proud black man who'd worked his way to the top through grit and intelligence, wasn't about to bow to anyone's false authority. James showed up at the next HOA meeting with one goal: to make it clear that he wasn't about to be bullied by anyone, least of all by a woman like Susan Whitmore. The board was already seated when he walked in, 6 middle-aged suburban folks who thought managing mailboxes and lawn heights made them rulers of the world. At the head sat Susan, perfectly coiffed, draped in pastel arrogance, her pearl earrings gleaming under the cheap, fluorescent lights. She didn't even look up when James entered. That alone told him everything he needed to know. He stepped right to the front, the folded letter in his hand. "Let's talk about this," he said firmly. Susan raised her eyes with the kind of boredom only power-hungry people could master. "Mr. Smith, we're in the middle of—" James dropped the letter on the table. "My Ducati," he interrupted. "What's this nonsense about removing it from my driveway?" Finally, she looked up, her expression the perfect blend of smug patience and superiority. "This is a violation of community standards," she replied, her tone smooth and rehearsed. "We have to maintain a certain image here. An image that doesn't include motorcycles, right?" James shot back, his dark eyes steady. Susan's smile faltered, then returned, thinner this time. "We're protecting property values, Mr. Smith. Our neighborhood has a reputation to uphold." James almost laughed. He'd sat in million-dollar boardrooms negotiating with corporate giants, and he knew manipulation when he heard it. This wasn't about property values. It was about control. Susan's need to feel important, to remind everyone who was in charge. He could have ended it there. He could have rolled the Ducati into his garage and gone on with his life like most people would have. But James wasn't most people. He'd worked too hard, faced too much to ever let someone like Susan dictate where he could park his own property. He stared her dead in the eye and said, quietly but firmly, "No." The word hit the room like a spark to gasoline. The other board members shifted uneasily. Susan's face twitched, a tiny crack in her porcelain composure. "You refuse to comply?" she asked. "That's exactly what I'm saying," James replied. "Then further action will be taken," she warned. James leaned forward slightly. "Try it. Have you ever been threatened by someone who thought their position gave them power over you? What would you do if a neighborhood committee tried to intimidate you into hiding your own property just to feed their sense of control? Before we go any deeper, What city or country are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments below. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from, and if you believe that standing your ground isn't defiance, it's dignity, then smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because this story right here shows exactly what happens when arrogance pushes the wrong man too far. That night, James went to bed uneasy. He didn't trust Susan's type, people who smiled while plotting, and sure enough, his instincts were right. In the dead of night, he was jolted awake by a sound that didn't belong, a metallic clank, low and deliberate, like heavy chains scraping against concrete. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then his gut clenched, a silent alarm blaring inside him. Something was wrong. He threw off the covers and hurried to the window. His heart dropped. The driveway was empty. The Ducati was gone. For a full second, he couldn't even process it. Gone, that was impossible. He'd parked it there just last night, locked, secured, untouched. Panic hit like a wave, followed by a rush of hot anger. James was out the door before he even realized he wasn't wearing shoes. The cool pavement stung his bare feet as he scanned the street, searching for tire marks, broken glass, any clue. But there was nothing. No signs of a break-in, no forced entry, no alarm triggered. That could only mean one thing: the bike hadn't been stolen. It had been towed. And there was only one group with the power and the arrogance to do that. The damn HOA! His jaw tightened as he grabbed his truck keys, fury simmering behind his calm expression. He needed proof before confronting Susan, so he dialed the only number that made sense: the local impound lot. The phone rang several times before a tired-sounding man answered, his voice half asleep. Yeah? My motorcycle, James said sharply. A '69 Ducati Scrambler with a gold tank. Was it brought in tonight? The man yawned. Hold on. The sound of clacking keys followed. Then, yeah, that one came in a few hours ago. James froze. A few hours ago? Yup, his voice dropped. Is it in one piece? A pause. Then the man hesitated, and that hesitation told James everything. Depends on what you mean by one piece. That was all it took. 15 minutes later, his truck screeched to a stop outside the lot, gravel flying. What he saw through the chain link fence made his blood run cold. There it was, or what was left of it. The sight hit James like a punch to the gut. His beloved 1969 Ducati Scrambler, the pride of his collection, the symbol of years of passion and patience, lay twisted and broken on the ground. The golden tank was crushed inward like someone had stomped it with deliberate malice. The chrome he'd once polished every weekend was scratched, dented, and warped. The front wheel was turned at an impossible angle. For a moment, James couldn't even breathe. A short, balding man appeared beside him, leaning lazily against the fence. He looked half bored, half annoyed. Yeah, he muttered. That's how it came in. James turned sharply toward him. You let them tow it like this? The man shrugged. Wasn't my call. HOA called us, said it was abandoned property. We just picked it up. Abandoned. The word cut deep, sharp, insulting. They had called his Ducati abandoned, the bike that sat in his own driveway, the bike that cost more than most of their houses combined. Something inside him snapped. James had always been a calm man, the kind who let small injustices slide, who walked away instead of arguing. But this wasn't small. This was theft, destruction, disrespect. And this time, walking away wasn't an option. He could already picture Susan's smug face, that fake, polite smile, the way she'd tilt her head just so, pretending innocence while dripping with arrogance. He could hear her voice in his head. Mr. Smith, I suggest you calm down. Oh, he was calm. Deadly calm. Because James wasn't just a motorcycle enthusiast. He was the CEO of Ducati North America, a man who knew power when he needed to use it. And Susan Whitmore had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The HOA hadn't just damaged his motorcycle, they'd destroyed a priceless collector's piece, seized it illegally, and lied about it. And James Smith, a proud black man who'd spent his whole life earning respect the hard way, wasn't about to let anyone, not even a neighborhood tyrant, get away with that. This wasn't anger anymore. This was war. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, James walked in cool and collected, the kind of calm that made people nervous. The board members were already seated, their usual forced smiles in place, pretending their little club still meant something. At the center, as always, sat Susan Whitmore, like she was auditioning for a talk show segment on suburban leadership. She barely looked up when he entered. That smug, self-satisfied look was still there, like she thought she'd won. James stood silently for a moment, watching her flip through her notes like he didn't exist. Finally, she spoke, her tone dripping with that syrupy, fake politeness. "I hope you understand now, Mr. Smith," she said, "that this is a community, not a junkyard." She just called his priceless 1969 Ducati Scrambler, worth $500,000, junk. James smiled, calm but cold. "Oh, I understand perfectly," he said. For the first time, her confidence wavered. A flicker of unease crossed her eyes. James turned, walked out without another word, and drove straight home. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. Because this time, the battle wasn't going to be fought in that HOA meeting. It was going to be fought in court. That same night, he made one phone call to Ducati's legal division. When a company worth billions gets wind that a neighborhood association illegally towed and destroyed one of their historic collector's pieces, things move fast, very fast. By morning, the paperwork was drafted. By noon, it was filed. By the end of the week, the HOA received a cease and desist letter, followed by a $1.2 million lawsuit for theft, property damage, and unlawful seizure. It was a masterpiece of legal precision, printed on thick corporate letterhead that practically screamed authority. The moment the documents landed on Susan's doorstep, panic spread through the board like wildfire. The same people who used to hide behind HOA rules were now scrambling to save themselves. And for the first time, Susan Whitmore wasn't the one holding power. She was the one being crushed by it. The lawsuit hit the HOA like a wrecking ball. Within days, the board was in chaos, resignations flying in, panicked emails, desperate attempts to shift blame, but there was no escaping it. Susan had crossed the wrong man, and now the consequences were closing in fast. At the emergency meeting, Susan's voice cracked as she shouted, "This is insane!" waving the lawsuit papers like she could tear reality apart with her bare hands. Her manicured fingers trembled as she glared across the table at James, who sat back calmly, arms folded, his face unreadable. "I don't know, Susan," he said evenly. "Seems fair to me. My so-called junkyard bike was worth more than your entire house." Her face flushed red, caught between outrage and fear, because it was true. Her house, worth about $900,000, couldn't even cover the damages. When the court fees and penalties stacked up, it was game over. In court, James sat confidently, while Susan and her flustered lawyer scrambled to defend the indefensible. Every smug email, every fake citation, every power-drunk message she'd ever sent, printed, documented, presented as evidence. The judge's expression hardened the moment he saw the Ducati's appraisal, $500,000 destroyed through negligence. The ruling came swift and brutal. The HOA was fully liable, $1.2 million in damages. The only way to pay it? Sell Susan's home. When the movers came, the entire neighborhood gathered outside, watching as her designer furniture was hauled away. Champagne bottles popped, cheers echoed through the cul-de-sac. The reign of the HOA queen was over. And James? He didn't just win, he made history. He bought Susan's foreclosed home himself and turned it into something poetic, the Ducati Heritage Gallery. What was once her pride became a monument to her downfall. Behind glass, at the center of her former living room, stood the restored 1969 Ducati Scrambler, rebuilt, gold-plated, shining brighter than ever. If you believe that what happened here wasn't just justice, it was payback with purpose, then smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because sometimes the real victory isn't winning the fight, it's making sure the people who started it never forget who they messed with.